Okay, I will call the September 14th, 2022 meeting of the Manitou Springs Planning Commission to order. First item, and I'll call the roll. Commissioner Storm.
Present.
Commissioner Casey.
Present.
Commissioner Graybill.
Present.
And I'm Commissioner Delwich. So we have a quorum. And next item is approval of minutes of the May 11th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I can second that.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? No. Okay. And then next item is approval of the August 10th regular meeting minutes. Motion to. Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Good.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so now we'll move on to our, I'll actually, I'd like to the order and item 3 is a major conditional use, and I'd like to move that, switch that with item 4, which is a minor development plan, just because I need to have an attorney and he won't be available until a few minutes because he's stuck in traffic. So can I have a motion to switch to item 3 and 4?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay, all in favor? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we will start with that, but first, I'll just, for the benefit of people who haven't been to a meeting, before I'll describe our process. And I'll call an item for consideration, and planning staff will describe what the applicant's request was and provide their analysis and findings based on the application from the applicant. And following that, the applicant will have an opportunity to speak and state their case. And following that, we'll open up the hearing to the public, and it's your opportunity to comment on the item under consideration and state your thoughts on it. And following that, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing, and we will deliberate and vote to approve, possibly deny, possibly postpone. And as we're going through the process, we're guided by our zoning code and subdivision code. And we interpret what's in those codes. We're not legislators. We can't change the rules. We don't change the laws. We simply interpret what's in the code, and that's our process. So with that, are there any conflicts or ex parte contacts to disclose? Okay, seeing none, we'll go start with item 4. It's a minor development plan, minors 2020-2202, non-residential change of use for a hair salon, 335 Manitou Avenue. Katie Winnick, applicant, on behalf of Adeline Holdings LLC, owner.
Thank you, Chair Delwich. So tonight, Chelsea Strongberg fell ill, so we are stepping in to assist. So give me a second to get that screen shared. All right, so just as described, the application, Kelsey, do you want to do? Okay, there you go.
Thank you, commissioners. So for the record, Kelsey Lanham, planning technician for the planning department. This presentation is for MNR 2202 minor development plan at 335 Manitou Avenue for a new business, a hair salon, and a crystal healing center. So the Manitou Springs Municipal Code defines a minor development plan as including a non-residential change in use without significant impacts. This property is zoned commercial and is currently a multi-use building. The other uses include a nonprofit office, a nutritionist office, and a culinary service office. The proposed space for the hair salon and crystal healing center was previously occupied by a medical clinic. This proposed use is not anticipated to produce substantial externalities different from those produced by the previous one. So this photo shows the proposed site plan. This property sits adjacent to Manitou Avenue and offers parking behind the building. There are currently 7 parking spaces associated with the building. Staff finds that the existing parking is sufficient for the proposed use. Code requires 1 parking space per 400 square foot for office use. Each office is approximately 300 square feet, which requires approximately 2.25 parking spaces combined. Many of the review criteria are focused on external conditions and are generally geared towards new development. However, this proposal is regarding an interior change of use. External conditions are generally not affected. Some of the review criteria may not be applicable. So section 18.24.050 of the municipal code states that the minor development plan may be approved by City Planning Commission subject to the following criteria. 1, generally consistent with Plan Manitou. This proposed use is generally consistent with Plan Manitou. Plan Manitou calls for the redevelopment and reuse of underutilized properties. Number 2, it must comply with water, sewer, and fire protection requirements detailed in the Manitou Springs Municipal Code. And this existing building was constructed in compliance with these requirements. Number 3, it must comply with the city roadway design and construction standards as revised. And this existing site was developed in compliance with these requirements. Number 4, it must comply with the criteria in code section chapter 18.24. Many of the required components did not apply to this proposed change in use. The only components required of this application were a narrative, a site plan to include parking details, and the building details. Number 5, it must comply with all requirements of the subdivision regulations, and staff found that this criteria does not apply. Number 6, avoid known natural hazard areas to the maximum and provide adequate mitigation for potential impacts associated with such hazards. Staff found that this criteria does not apply to the proposed change in use. Number 7, be prepared in accordance with generally accepted professional standards. The site plan and building details were prepared to generally accepted professional standards. And number 8, be associated with an application where development-related fees due on the affected property shall be paid unless the requirement is waived by the City Planning Commission for good cause shown. And staff found that this criteria does not apply to the proposed change in use. And for the record, staff did not receive any public comment on this item. So should the Planning Commission find it appropriate to approve the minor development plan, staff recommends the following condition. No more than 1 client may be seen at a time, with 1 additional client permitted in the waiting area. And these are the proposed motions. 1, approve the minor development plan based upon the findings that the request meets the review criteria with staff's condition as outlined. 2, approve the minor development plan based upon the findings that the request meets the review criteria with an alteration to staff's condition. 3, deny the minor development plan based upon the findings that the request does not meet the review criteria. Or number 4, postpone the minor development plan to October 12th, 2022 regular city planning commission hearing for further consideration. And that concludes my presentation. I am available for questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, with the applicant, I'd like to step to the table. And you need to bring the mic pretty close and push the middle button there and state your name and address for the record.
My name's Catherine Winnick, and the address of the building that I'm occupying.
You're at residence.
Oh, my residence.
Yeah.
It's 829 North Spruce Street, Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80905.
Great, thank you. This is your opportunity to add anything, or are you comfortable with the staff recommendations?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to say?
I grew up in Manitou. I love it here. My children all go to school here, even though we live in Colorado Springs. And the business is positioned right where my kids can walk to my work. And I'm hoping to move here one day. Also, it's just me in the office space. I'm coming with a pretty full clientele already, so it just lined up that the space opened up. The rent was good, the parking situation was great, and I have a lot of clients from Manitou, so.
Great. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now the hearing's open to the public. If anybody would like to comment on this item, now would be the time to do it. I just need to step to the mic and state your name and address for the record to start.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Butts Boucher, and I live at 612 High Street in Manitou Springs, Colorado. And I feel that this business would be a very welcomed business coming into Manitou as we start to welcome robust and diverse businesses in that support not only our tourist population, but also residents as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no one else wanting to comment, then I'll close the public comment portion of the hearing. Anybody would like to make a motion or comment? Now would be the time.
Motion to approve minor conditional use permit 2202 with the staff's recommendations. Minor development plan, rather. 202 with the staff recommendations.
I'll second that.
There's no more discussion, then all in favor? Raise your hand, say aye. Okay, so that's unanimous. That's approved. Thank you. So we'll move on. Next item of business is major conditional use 2203 mobile food vending at 27 Manitou Avenue. Holly Carpenter applicant on behalf of Swayze owner.
Thank you, Chair Delwich. For the record, Hannah Van Den Planning Director for City of Manitou Springs. Like I mentioned earlier today, or earlier in this meeting, Chelsea is unable to attend tonight, so I am filling in. But as described, this is a major conditional use request for a food truck at Emerald Fields. So this is in the commercial zone district with a redevelopment overlay. They are proposing the location on the far north corner of the site, as well as the western portion of the site in those parking spaces. They are describing that the food truck would only be present Monday through Wednesday. The applicant may need to clarify the timeframes, but it's only for a certain portion of the day as well. With that information, we are recommending a few conditions if this City Planning Commission found it appropriate to approve the conditional use. The first condition would be only one mobile food vendor is permitted to operate at a time. That the vendor hours are limited from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that's the answer to my question there. And this major conditional use is only valid while the business is permitted and operational at 27 Manitou Avenue. So we have a series of potential motions. They're very similar to what you just heard. Either approve the major conditional use with the staff's conditions as outlined, approve the use with an alteration to staff's condition, deny the major conditional use, or postpone. With that, I'd like to conclude staff's presentation, but the applicant is present tonight for any specific questions, and I can answer what I can. Thank you.
Right, any questions?
I have a question. How hard and fast is that Monday through Wednesday?
Thank you, Commissioner Graybill. So if it were approved as a condition as part of the major conditional use permit, it would run with the land just like any other condition for a major conditional use permit. So at that point, it does become law and we could enforce it if it wasn't being adhered to. So it would be pretty steadfast.
Thank you.
I have a question for the city attorney. And I was, I kind of looked at our reference and there was a citation to the state rules on marijuana. And digging through like page 300 or something in this massive document, there's a description of limitations on marijuana, say, enterprises. And there's an item that says prohibited items. A retail marijuana store is prohibited from selling or giving away any consumable product that is not a retail marijuana product or an industrial hemp product, including but not limited to cigarettes or tobacco products, alcohol beverages, and food products or non-alcohol beverages. They're not retail marijuana product. So this is kind of murky since it's on the premises, but it's not in the building. I just wasn't sure if that was a consideration we needed to make.
It's a great question, but I don't think so. It would be based off the actual definition of dispensary. That's what those regulations will attach to. So the regulations will attach to the operations within that structure, and it has to be an actual structure by definition under state law. Does that answer your question?
So this is not in conflict, basically.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. That was my question. Other questions?
So I have a question regarding the staff report. Because I didn't see it in the write-up. I think you said the applicant had requested something like hours of operation of 10 to 3, but you're recommending 8 to 8. Why wouldn't we go with the staff recommendation being from 10 to 3 and limit the hours?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Storm. So we can definitely adjust that time frame. I think the intent was to provide some level of flexibility for maybe some kind of a special event or I don't know, something along those lines. However, the applicant, my understanding is that they've outlined specifically 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So we could adjust that condition if that was favorable to the commission.
Any other questions for the staff? Okay, now it's time for the applicant to step to the table.
Hi.
Okay, you have to grab it, almost kiss the microphone there. And
Hi.
State your name and address
All
for the
right.
record, please.
Holly Carpenter, and I reside at 23 Dorchester Drive in Colorado Springs, Colorado, 80905.
Okay. And the floor is yours.
Wonderful. So I just kind of wanted to, if it's appropriate time to do so, address some of the concerns that I did get from some of the residents. Sorry. Address some of the concerns that I got from the residents in opposition of the major conditional use permit. So we got two. One of them, well, both of them address traffic concerns, which is understandable. Our driveway is just a few hundred feet from the turn into the Crystal Hills neighborhood. Really, the reason why we are wanting this food truck is across the state, and of course, we're feeling it here as well in Manitou. Marijuana sales are down exponentially. Part of that is legalization in New Mexico. So a lot of the tourism traffic that we would get from other states coming down, visiting Colorado, going to Manitou is now going to New Mexico. I brought some stats here. We are actually for the year 12.9% down on foot traffic in Manitou for our business. So really, the hope indeed is to bring more people to our dispensary through that food truck. But it would not increase traffic in any way that we haven't seen over the past years. It would still more than likely be less than what we have seen. There was also the concern of minors being on property, consuming food from our food truck, which is a valid concern. Two things about that. We do have security on site 24/7. So they do regular rounds of our parking lot. They are constantly checking for things like third-party sales, minors on premises who are unaccompanied. Nothing about that would change. If anything, while food trucks were present, we would ask security to be more outside than inside to keep an eye on that. We also have a see something, say something culture at Manitou and Emerald Fields. We have 0 occurrences of underage sales. So really, in my perspective, knowing what I know about my business, I know that it would not be undue risk to minors in order to have, a food truck on our property. The other concern that was addressed from a citizen of Crystal Hills neighborhood was a concern about the existing food restaurants in Manitou, and that it would be taking business away from them. We did send out that letter of intent to them and got no opposition whatsoever. So I don't think it's a concern for them. Other than that, really just the understanding that this is meant to drum up business, not only for this year, but for tax revenue as well, when more than likely Colorado Springs will be going recreational and we'll see a major decline in the tax revenue and the sales that we make at Emerald Fields.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Okay, and I did just want to clarify that it would only be Monday through Wednesday, 11 to 4. And that is because those are our slowest business hours. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have no issue bringing guests in. That's just really our slow times that we're hoping to ramp up the business.
Great, thank you. Okay, now it's time for public comment. If anybody would like to comment on this item, just step to the microphone and state your name and address. Okay, I see no takers, so I'll close a public comment part of this hearing.
I'd be willing to support it with the modification to staff recommendation 2 that the mobile vendor hours are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 8 to 4.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, please. I should have asked the applicant, but Hannah, do you know if this is going to be permanently parked? Is it coming and going at night?
I would like to defer that question to the applicant. My understanding is that it would leave the site for a new truck each day, but.
And that is correct. It would just be 1 truck at a time. So 3 trucks a week. And once 4 p.m. comes around, they're out of our parking lot. We're back to normal.
Could I ask a question? Will you be supplying them with power? Or are they going to be running a generator?
They will need to be running a generator.
Mike, did you have more? Or-
No, thanks.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion.
I'll second it.
Is there any more discussion?
Please. in the application, there was two locations of two locations of the truck. And I think that if this truck is parked down on towards Manitou Avenue. Right, so you with me? That makes it, it's almost blocking, if you're coming down Crystal Hills Boulevard, taking a right, I could see where that could block traffic, or I mean, block the view. And if there's people gathered around this truck, it may be detrimental if you're turning east on Crystal Hills Boulevard. So I would prefer if it was on the west location only.
Can I ask the planning director to put the map back up on the screen, please?
Well, I'm suggesting eliminating the one on the left and putting the truck on the location on the right.
Okay.
I support that.
Right.
That makes sense.
I also think that this is going to be detrimental to the neighborhood, but I think Monday through Wednesday, 11 to 4 is acceptable.
Okay, so you're suggesting a friendly amendment to the motion to restrict it to that one location?
Correct. Yes.
I have no problem with that.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, I'm comfortable with this, especially with the limitation to Monday through Wednesday. Those hours, I think it's reasonable. And considering that we didn't get any negative feedback from other restaurants or businesses, I'm even more comfortable with it. So if there's no more discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and that's, this is a recommendation. So the next stop will be with City Council, and do we know which meeting that'll be?
I believe that could be the October 4th meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on. Next item, and we are taking these two together, I assume.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, this will be Major Development Plan 2201 at 183 Crystal Park Road. William Gooman and Associates applicant on behalf of Manitou Cabins LLC owner, and Vacation 2201, a vacation of right of way, vacate a portion of Crystal Park Road. William Gooman and Associates applicant on behalf of Manitou Cabins LLC.
Thank you, Chair Delwich. Let me get my screen shared here. Okay, so I have a relatively short presentation. The applicant team is also present tonight and also has a presentation to share. But as described, this is a proposed major development plan and a right-of-way vacation request. So just a general overview on the site, we're looking at a property that's roughly 9 acres in size. It's currently zoned LDR, low density residential. Largely, they're proposing to rehabilitate a series of existing cabins and cottages on the property and construct 2 new cabins in that same area. They're also proposing on the east side of Sutherland Creek to subdivide that area into 9 single-family lots. And those lots would be intended for single-family detached development. They're also proposing a new park site. That park site is about 11,600 square feet in size. It is on the immediate corner of Crystal Park Road and Sutherland Road. That did go through PARAB. They find the site to be acceptable. So the specific request is requesting a recommendation of approval of the major development plan and right-of-way vacation. This is a quick look at that development plan. On the west-ish side of the site, I guess northwest side, that's generally where the existing cabins and cottages exist. And to the southwest of the creek, there are two rectangles that indicate where the new cabins would be constructed. And the architecture of the new cabins would have to go in front of the Historic Preservation Commission when that time was appropriate. And on the east side of their lot, or on the property, are 9 lots that are intended for single-family detached development. There is an access road that comes off of Sutherland Road to the north. That access road does align with Mountain View Road to the north of Sutherland Road. And that was a specific request from the city engineer. So moving on, the City Planning Commission has heard this item before. So this is a continuation, or sorry, they heard a concept plan in April of this year. So this is a major development plan that mimics or is very representative of what you heard in April. There are a few minor changes. There was a reduction from 10 lots to 9, the addition of the park site, and also the addition of the 2 cabin structures I described. 2 neighborhood meetings have been held. One was on March 4th of last year, and the second was on April 8th of this year. For the first meeting, about 65 neighbors were in attendance. We did notify 195 property owners within 500 feet of the subject parcel. And that occurred with both neighborhood meetings. Then moving on to the different hearings that this project has been in front of. At first, they were heard by the Historic Preservation Board or Commission for a historic district boundary adjustment. Then they went to the City Council for that same request. That request ended up being denied. So the entire site still exists within a historic district. Then in April of this year, the City Planning Commission heard the concept plan. Then just last month, or just last week, I should say, the Historic Preservation Commission also heard a request for 3 demolitions. They did recommend approval of those demolitions. It's up to the City Council to make a final decision on that request, though. A tier 2 report was submitted with the application submittal. That report found that the site is developable. However, it does recommend that tier 3 site-specific reports are necessary for the development of the single-family lots. Understanding that, a note was added to the cover page that requires, if at a time where a homeowner was ready to develop one of those 9 lots, part of their application submittal would be a tier 3 report. A traffic impact study was also submitted. That traffic impact study generally found that there would not be significant impacts to the intersections in the general vicinity. So it anticipates or projects that 269 new vehicle trips would be generated on an average weekday. Generally speaking, 5 would enter the site during the morning peak hour and 16 would leave the site. During the afternoon peak hour, 16 vehicles would enter and 9 would exit. They did find that the Manitou Avenue and Crystal Park Road intersection would operate at a level of service B with or without the proposed development. And that's the same finding with the unsignalized intersections adjacent to the property. The traffic report also found that no roadway improvements would be necessary for the proposed development. We did send this major development plan out for review to a series of review agencies. Largely, technical modifications were sent back to us. Those technical modifications have been made. The one that we are of focus tonight will be what Public Works submitted back to us. So they said that they would not be supportive of a right-of-way vacation due to the limited space the right-of-way vacation would leave for maintenance crews, and that being both roadway maintenance and utility maintenance. I do need to make a minor clarification in the staff report. I believe I worded something where it read like the right-of-way vacation would actually encroach into the existing pavement mat. That is not true. So it would not be encroaching into the existing pavement. However, it would reduce any potential or much potential for any roadway widening that may occur in the future. There's no project right now that anticipates that happening. However, if that were to come up, this would prevent any future roadway expansion. Oops. So because of Public Works' serious concern about the ability to maintain Crystal Park Road and how the right-of-way vacation may interfere with their ability to do so, staff actually recommends denial of the major development plan and right-of-way vacation purely for that reason. So staff is supportive of the intent of the project. However, because of this right-of-way vacation request, we do not find the current application proposals to be acceptable. But the roadway could still exist. I want to make that clear with the vacation. They could probably make it work. However, they do have Public Works being it does have serious concerns. And with that, that concludes staff presentation, but the applicant also has a presentation.
Any questions for staff?
Can we come back?
Sure.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Bill Gooman. I'm a principal with William Gooman and Associates. My address is 731 North Weber Street, Colorado Springs, 80903. And thank you for being here and for allowing us to make our presentation to you this evening. We did distribute copies of the PowerPoint presentation that we'll show you. We also do have enlarged copies, 24 by 36 prints and 11 by 17 copies of the development plan, some of the existing structures that are within the project, and also some 36 by 24 plans of the area proposed for vacation on Crystal Park Road. So they are available here if it would make it easier for you to take a look at them. I know when we were here once previously, it was kind of difficult for you to discern what was on the screen. And we thought this would make it a little easier in case you had any questions about the content of those plans. I indicated or I mentioned who I am, and sitting with me on my left is you're Marty Johnson. Marty and Nancy are two of the owners of Manitou Cabins LLC, and to my right is Taylor Stamp, who is also an owner of Manitou Cabins LLC. And in the audience, we have Rich Gallegos, who is a civil engineer with Respect in Colorado Springs. And they are the project engineer that helped us put together our development plan proposal. Next slide. And the next slide. And as Hannah had mentioned, there was a public notification that had gone out. A notification letter was originally mailed to 195 residents within 500 feet of the property. The property was also posted. We mailed a second time for notification of this evening's hearing with the Planning Commission. There were 149 residents that were contacted in that mailing, and that was within 300 feet of the Manitou Cabins property. We received one email in response out of the 149 that were mailed out with a concern regarding public process that was received by the city and shared with us as the applicant. Accompanying the notification letter was the copy of the major development plan and also a copy of the vacated right-of-way request for Crystal Park Road, and those were in the envelope with the notification letter. The letter also indicated that if there were any further questions that were not addressed in the material that accompanied the mailing, that anyone was welcome to visit the planning office and review the documents in person or to contact us directly. We were not contacted directly by anybody, but we were advised that one email had been received by the city. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a monumental occasion for us this evening. This application and the public hearing is a culmination of over 2+ years of planning effort, public process with many citizens, negotiations, presentations, and working closely with several of Manitou Springs' boards, commissions, and staff to ensure that meaningful input and responses would become an integral part of the entitlement process for Manitou Cabins. During these 2.5 years, the owners and applicant for the Keithley Log Subdistrict, the Log Cabin Subdistrict, which is also known as Manitou Cabins, we've worked with 6 different city staff planners assigned to the project, 3 planning directors, 2 city administrators, and 2 outside planning consultants, along with a historian retained by the county to assist with the historic elements of this review. An extensive neighborhood public process included 2 on-site advertised public meetings with neighbors that were hosted by the owner, and 1 informal meeting to walk the property with about a half dozen interested adjacent neighbors. And a combined 102 interested attendees participated in that. We did take an attendance list at the open house that we had at the kickoff of this. So we have made an extra effort to involve the community in this public process. The plans were drawn and redrawn, and over a 2-year planning and review period, and that's what's on the left side here. This is a screenshot of our planning file for Manitou Cabins. There were no fewer than 17 revisions that were made to accommodate as many people and reviewing agencies as possible. This is not a huge project by comparison with some, but this just gives you an idea of the extent of the public input process and what we have tried to do to accommodate everyone as best as possible. This evening's presentation and the plan, the development plan that you're seeing is the 17th revision that's been made in that 2-year process. Next slide. This is an outline of the Keithley Log Cabin Subdistrict. The red outline shows the entire subdistrict. The dark crosshatch on the lower right corner of the site, the southeast corner of the site, is the existing log cabin district. These are where the existing cabins and structures are that are included with this proposal for refurbishing and selling the cabins to private individuals. The red hatch is the area that Hannah indicated before that includes the 9 lots that will be sold to individual developers or folks that are interested in building a home. The revenue generated from the sales of those lots and partially from those homes are going to contribute appreciably to help us complete the restoration of the cabins in the historic portion of the site. I should mention also, the Historic Preservation Commission had been asked several months ago to consider removing the red hatched portion from the historic district. And that request was denied. So we are prepared for new structures, the 9 homes that would eventually be built in that portion of the site to adhere to the historic criteria of the city's historic preservation guidelines. Next slide. This is a rendering of the existing structures within the Keithley Log Cabin Subdistrict. It's a fairly accurate representation of the vegetation, the larger or the more mature vegetation that's out on the property right now. If you're familiar with the property and if you've been out there and following progress over the last year, we've had arborists hired to come out there and provide selective care on the existing trees that are there. If there were dead branches, dead trees, trees that encroached into the right-of-way, they were trimmed, they were removed. Our intent is to preserve as much of the existing vegetation on the property as possible. Unbeknownst to us, when we began the public process and the planning process, a lot of those trees out there have historic significance. They were planted as part of or in conjunction with a nursery that the Keithleys originally had on the property. We have no way of identifying and knowing exactly which of the trees were included in the property or in the landscaping of the property. But we think that quite a few of those trees are part of the original historic subdistrict of the Keithley Log Cabin Subdistrict. Next slide. Again, if you've been out to the property, you're familiar with the cabins and the other structures that exist on the site. Here are 9 of them. You have some copies of this in the package that was handed to you. We included dates under the photos here. Hannah, you can go to the next slide too. The cabins, beginning with buildings 1 and 2, were constructed from 1925 through 1985. So we have quite we have quite a history, a long history of development on the site. The cabins and the structures that you're seeing on the monitor on the screen right now indicate the 1925 cabins, the 1935 cabins. There were cabins that were built in 1953 and several that were built in 1975. Hannah, you can go to the next slide. There were also several structures that were built in 1967 and in 1985. The 1960 structures are the two on the right in the middle row that were constructed in 1967, and the garage and maintenance shop in the center on the top that was constructed in 1985. When we appeared before the Historic Preservation Commission about 10 days ago, we did receive permission or a recommendation to allow the two duplex buildings. They're identified as building 28 and 29, 30 and 31, and also the garage and shop to be demolished. The historian that had been retained by the city to study the Keithley log cabin subdistrict indicated that there was no contributing factors for these three buildings that could justify them being regarded as truly historic in the nature of what should be considered historic for this site based on the guidelines of the design criteria. Those are the only three structures right now that are scheduled for demolition. And basically, as Hannah had described, the garage in the center will be demolished. Hannah, next slide. Thank you. The garage is indicated top right, the red box, and you can see that that cabin, or it's not a cabin, it's a garage, straddles the new interior road that accesses the rest of the new site. In order to have that new interior road align with Mountain View Lane, Mountain View Lane, we did have to request for that garage to be demolished. And further down, you see the two duplexes that were also recommended for demolition by the Historic Preservation Commission. Those again are non-contributing structures. They do not have any historic value, and they will facilitate development of the road. We are required by the fire department to provide a turnaround at the end of the road, which is why you see the cul-de-sac there. And to accommodate the diameter of that cul-de-sac and setback requirements, and also to avoid new development from encroaching into the hillside that's behind those two structures, they've been approved for demolition. So that'll be some of the first activity that you'll see out there. The cabin that is identified as cabin 7, which is located within the Crystal Park Road right-of-way, is also indicated. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. That cabin was constructed in 1935 and was deemed to comply with historic preservation guidelines, where it did meet most of the criteria as a contributing structure for historic structures. Next slide. Here are some larger photos of the buildings that have been recommended for demolition. Next slide. This is the cover page of the proposed development plan. Next slide. This is the actual proposed development plan. So as Hannah described, there are 9 additional lots. It was indicated that that was a reduction from 10 lots and new homes that had been proposed. Originally, when the process began over 2 years ago, there were closer to 17 lots that were being presented at that time. We realized due to the configuration of the site and with compatibility requirements for the adjacent properties, that 17 cabins or 17 new structures would probably not fly. And we've reduced the number of lots since then so that we're down to 9 lots. The existing cabins that you are looking at are on a fee simple, excuse me, type development where the actual lot that those cabins will be sold with is the footprint of the cabin. So what that means is if we have a 1,200 square foot footprint of the cabin, you own or you would own the 1,200 square feet of land that's under that cabin. So that creates a lot of open space or common area throughout the balance of the historic district. All of that would be a common area that's maintained and taken care of by a homeowners association. So it's, even though they're single family cabins, single family lots, there's a couple of duplexes mixed in there as well. It kind of qualifies as a condominium development in that there is a common area, but individuals own the home and the land that the home sits on. Next slide. We did take into consideration existing slopes on the property. We are minimizing the impact of development within the existing historic district west of the creek. There really is, with the exception of the 2 proposed cabins that you see lower left corner of the site. Those are 690, 700 square foot cabins that are proposed basically to make up for the loss of the 2 lots that were given up to the Parks Department for the new pocket park, the 11,000 square foot park that is proposed. That is a dedication to the city by the owners of Manitou Cabins. Next slide, utilities. Next slide, roadway profile. This shows the interior road that'll provide access to the 9 lots that are brand new lots. I should mention to you, since the portion west of Sutherland Creek wasn't approved for removal from the historic district, that any new development that occurs on those 9 lots will have to adhere to the historic design guidelines. So any new development that occurs on those 9 lots, whether it's a developer who will build all of those 9 lots at one time, or if they're sold off individually and there are individual homeowners that intend to build there, they will have to follow the criteria of the historic design guidelines, and they will have to meet with the Historic Preservation Commission to ensure that their interpretation of what's expected there is correct. So there will be continuity in architecture with the cabin district. The design guidelines, the historic design guidelines within the cabin district are pretty stringent. We learned a lot in the last year and a half as far as what would be required, and it'll be incumbent upon those who actually develop and build on those 9 lots to follow those guidelines. Next slide. We also addressed grading and erosion control to minimize encroachment into any of the existing slope areas. Our grading plan and our geohazard, our geological survey report provides you with the findings of both the geologist and the engineer that prepared this drawing. Next slide. We are only required to provide one street light. One new street light will be located within the circular area. It shows where that street light is. This was a city requirement as far as the number of lights. There were questions and concerns about the amount of light that 9 new structures could generate in that area. And aside from your typical porch lights or garage lights that are mounted on the exterior elevation of a new building, there is only one street light, and that street light will have to adhere also to the historic design guidelines as far as the appearance of it. The circle indicates the street light coverage. So there are no street lights in the area of Mountain View Lane right now, and this will provide the additional lighting in that area. Next slide. The parking plan indicates the parking spaces that we're adding primarily within the cabin district. Not only are we required to provide parking spaces for the individual cabins and the residents of those cabins, but we do have some parking requirements on street and off street for guests of those residents. Plus, we've got parking spaces indicated off of Crystal Park Road to accommodate visitors to the Pocket Park at Sutherland Road and Crystal Park Road. Next slide. This graphic indicates the extent of the Pocket Park that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board agreed to accept from the developer. Initially, we had met with the Open Space Advisory Committee and then with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board regarding park space that they would like to see included on this property. It's an attractive piece of property. Sutherland Creek bisects it. There's a lot of interest. Folks would like to hike along that and spend time there. Part of the requirement of locating the Pocket Park in the area that we're showing here is that it does have frontage and access along Sutherland Creek. There was concern initially with the Parks and Rec Board and residents that had attended the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting that they didn't want to be off limits. They wanted to have access to Sutherland Creek as a recreational amenity. And all of the frontage that we're showing in the proposed Pocket Park provides that access to Sutherland Creek. Next slide. We are responsible for providing more landscaping, even though we do have a fair number of trees existing that we'd indicated earlier will remain. There still is an additional requirement for street trees along Crystal Park Road. We also have street tree requirements along the proposed interior road for the 9 new lots. So there's a fairly elaborate landscape plan that was prepared. There are quite a few trees and a landscape setback along that interior road. Next slide. Moving on to the vacation request. This is an interesting one. I mentioned cabin 7 on the development plan. During our initial surveying of the property so that we were able to come up with an accurate development plan that showed the locations of all the existing cabins on the property. It was discovered that one contributing structure, and by contributing structure, it qualifies as a historic unit according to the historian and according to the Historic Preservation Commission, where cabin 7 is bisected by Crystal Park Road's right of way. This is cabin 7. Next slide. This is a depiction of where cabin sits in relation to Crystal Park Road. The red line that you see, not the lower left shows a red construction fence, but there is a red line that is in the upper left shown looking south along Crystal Park Road. To the lower left, you're seeing that red line looking north along Crystal Park Road. And the photo to the right, that red line indicates the area of conflict between the Crystal Park Road right-of-way and the cabin 7 setback. What this right-of-way conflict does is bisect this historic cabin. This cabin is a 1935 contributing structure. So that 2/3 of this cabin sits within the public right-of-way and 1/3 sits within private property. We made staff aware of this before Hannah's time, and we were advised at that time, and this is going back about 18 months, how is this possible? We were required to have a professional licensed surveyor generate the site survey, which we'll be using for our final plat and which we used for the development plan. The surveyor discovered that there was an error made approximately 60 years ago, in which case the right-of-way for Crystal Park Road was allowed to encroach into the log cabin district. It was known by certain people, allegedly, and since there were no imminent plans for widening Crystal Park Road or widening the shoulder of Crystal Park Road, there was no incentive to do anything to correct that right of way and the distance from the edge of pavement of Crystal Park Road. So the cabin sat there and it's bisected so that actually 2/3 of this cabin, it's a 690 square foot structure, so it's not huge, but 2/3 of it sits on public property. And previous owners of the property, Cheyenne Village, and whoever was responsible for constructing the cabin have been aware of this all along. None of these cabins have ever been occupied or used as privately owned residences. That will change with the approval of the development plan that you see before you tonight. In order to sell that cabin, it can't be straddling a public right-of-way. 2/3 of that cabin cannot sit on public property and 1/3 sit on private property. It's not something that a title company will issue a title for. So as long as we can't get a title for it, it can't be sold. And right now, the unfortunate thing is, again, it does comply or it does adhere as a contributing structure within the historic district. We have gone ahead and gutted the cabin because we were told over a year ago to apply for a vacation of right-of-way of Crystal Park Road. We were also told, you know, this is not an uncommon occurrence in Manitou, that there are surveying areas, especially in the older parts of town. And, you know, since there were no plans for widening Crystal Park Road, that vacating the right-of-way would not be a major issue. Fast forward to where we are right now. You can see from the photos that are in front of you that there are existing trees in that right-of-way. There's existing vegetation in that right-of-way, and 2/3 of a historic cabin sits within that right-of-way. And we have asked to meet with Public Works on several occasions. Their opinion was, no, we're sorry, but you know, the right-of-way is what the right-of-way is, and there are maintenance considerations that we need to keep in mind. There's a possibility of widening the asphalt mat of Crystal Park Road, so we are opposed to giving up any of that right-of-way. Okay, that's fine. So here we are asking you to consider vacating that right-of-way. What does that mean? Next slide, please. This is a graphic. Left side of the graphic shows cabin 7, the shaded area that looks like, you know, a trapezoid or 3 sides that are on Crystal Park Road. That is the extent of the right-of-way that we are asking consideration to be vacated. If we're given approval to vacate that portion of the right-of-way, it does not encroach into the asphalt paved surface of Crystal Park Road. And what it allows us to do is correct a 60-year-old surveying error that the city admittedly has been aware of, but has chosen not to do anything about it to correct it. As previously mentioned, if we're given this right-of-way vacation, it does not reduce the asphalt pavement width of Crystal Park Road. It does not compromise traffic flow on Crystal Park Road. The traffic report pretty much made it clear that with or without approval of the development plan, the traffic impact on Crystal Park Road is going to be pretty minimal. And we're just saying that, you know, granting us that right-of-way vacation is not going to create a bottleneck or anything. Visually, you will see no change whatsoever in Crystal Park Road. It remains what it is. It is strictly a correction of a surveying error. Public Works indicated that giving up this portion of the right-of-way, which amounts to just about 1,000 square feet of area, I believe 1,068 square feet of area. We don't understand how it compromises activities in this portion of Crystal Park Road. It has no impact on snow removal. It has no impact on overlay or chip sealing or whatever Public Works does to maintain Crystal Park Road. Everything that you see out there will remain the same, with the exception our development plan, if the vacation is granted, corrects the surveying area, the survey error that was created. Most importantly, and we've run this by the Historic Preservation Commission. Of course, they weren't in a position to make any recommendation one way or another on this, but it allows historic cabin number 7 to remain where it is. We've done research, we've gotten numbers, figures, cost figures, and we were asked, well, can't you move cabin 7 to get it out of the right of way? It's an expensive proposition. I believe that your package, your planning package for this had an itemized cost breakdown of what it would cost to relocate cabin 7 elsewhere within the historic district. It's a lose-lose situation. From an economic feasibility standpoint, first of all, the cabin is partially on a foundation and partially on grade, which is an extremely difficult venture to try to pick up and remove. So we've been advised that the cabin would have to be dismantled and relocated and reconstructed. Bottom line, to relocate that cabin to an interior lot within the cabin district, it's about $400,000. And that's not feasible for a 690 square foot unit. And that's just the unfortunate reality of what we're dealing with right now with contractors' costs and materials costs. And there's no guarantee that once the cabin's relocated, that it's going to be structurally sound. The cabin needs to remain where it is, and that right of way needs to be removed so that it does not bisect it the way it does. The next slide is an enlargement of the area that we're talking about. You see where the existing right-of-way is. I mentioned that includes, it's 1,098 square feet, not 1,068. I'm sorry, there's a mistake there. Removing the right-of-way from Crystal Park Road. If there were plans for the city to improve, widen Crystal Park Road, it would be an entirely different matter. We've been told there are no plans now or in the future to widen Crystal Park Road. We don't understand the maintenance comment from Public Works. If there is a requirement, to use the vacated area for future maintenance requirements, we can write an agreement to allow or to provide an access easement onto that area to allow maintenance activities to remain ongoing as needed. But our request right now is that you consider recommending approval of the vacation of the right-of-way so that we can keep that historic structure in its current location. Conversely, if we are not allowed to vacate the right-of-way, we have a situation where there's an uninhabitable structure that is 2/3 on public property and 1/3 on private property. The owners of Manitou Cabin would be hard pressed to put any money into refurbishing a structure that they can't sell. It would theoretically, and the city attorney can add anything in here, become a responsibility of the city if it's on public property. For future improvements to that cabin. Anything regarding liability or whatever, we can't include that cabin within the titled portion of the log cabin district. So it's an attractive nuisance at best. And unfortunately, it wasn't discovered until recently by our surveyor. So last slide. Our request for MJR 2201, the major development plan. We're asking for you to approve the major development plan for the Manitou cabins based upon the findings that the requests meet the review criteria for granting a major development plan as set forth in City Code Section 18.26.070 with conditions as follows. 1, a public facilities and service impact report shall be submitted and reviewed in conjunction with a major subdivision application. 2, the required future major subdivision application shall be raised to the review authority of the Planning Commission, making a recommendation, and City Council with the decision authority. And 3, a note stating additional cabin structures not shown on this development plan are not permitted to be added to the major development plan. And the vacation right-of-way, VAC 2201, right-of-way vacation, we're requesting for approval of the right-of-way vacation of a portion of Crystal Park Road without reservation of any easements, based upon the findings that the request does meet the review criteria for granting a right-of-way vacation as set forth in City Code Section 16.34 with staff's conditions as outlined, and I believe those are included in the staff report. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Are there questions for the applicant now?
I have questions. On the vacation and the right of way, why are you asking for a greater area than the cabin footprint?
We have a setback requirement off the footprint of the cabin. If we were, we have a 20-foot setback requirement to satisfy. So the right of way goes beyond the cabin by approximately 20 feet.
If I look at that drawing, it doesn't look like the right of way goes to the street side 20 feet. How wide is that right of way you're requesting?
The dimensions of the right of way.
From the cabin on that side?
I can't scale this off from this particular graphic. But the right of way was designated to accommodate the setback requirements that are around that cabin based on it being adjacent to an arterial. If it was an interior lot, we don't have that same consideration.
Yeah, I'm curious that why the ends of it are wider. Another question, if this wasn't vacated, could it not become an amenity for the condo or cabin?
You know, ironically, and it was, I wouldn't say off the record, but it was discussed by the Historic Preservation Commission. Can't they purchase it on behalf of the city? And we're open to any offers to purchase that cabin. I won't speak for the owners on that, but that actually did come up in a conversation. We can't insure it. We can't sell it. It's debatable as if it, you know, whether it could be rented or not. It can't be rented without total refurbishing. I don't know if you've been out there and have peeked inside. It's a gutted structure. There's no floor. There are no walls. The roof's been, I believe, the roof in that one, the roof's been restored so that there, no, okay. Roofs of other cabins have been restored to prevent further damage, but we're in a caught between a rock and a hard place here with what do you do with this structure? When we purchased it, when the owner purchased it, there wasn't any awareness that this problem existed. Now that we're moving forward, or hopefully moving forward, with refurbishing and restoration of the cabin district, this is an issue. This is a problem.
Mike?
Yes, please. Is the issue that you want to preserve it and restore it to sell it, or is it the issue that it can't be demolished because of the HPC?
We've already told the HPC at the last meeting, and actually the preliminary hearing, we don't want to see the cabin demolished. We've never asked for the cabin to be demolished. The unfortunate reality is, if we are not granted the right of way, it can't be titled. So if it can't be titled, the cost of refurbishing that cabin is fairly significant for, in comparison to what, it will return as a sale, a structure for sale. The owners are hard pressed to put money into something that can't be sold and actually can't be rented. Whether previous owners were aware of this, we think they may have been, but we have no way of knowing who knew what. All we do know is that the surveying error does go back quite a few years. And rather than continuing to kick the can down the road and say, well, let's just leave it where it is, which is really unacceptable because it is a vacant structure. We need help. We really do need the proactive input of the city to determine and to help us. How do we correct this problem? We'd like to keep the cabin there. It does have historic value. It is by definition a contributing structure. And if we didn't have the right of way problem, no question, that cabin would be refurbished and it would stay there hopefully for another 75 or 80 years. But that's not the situation now. And we really would like to correct it, but we need the city's help in order to correct it. And this is the option, the only option we've been given.
Just one more, and thank you for your presentation. It helps a lot. It was very thorough and entertaining. You mentioned earlier that you would want or could offer a maintenance easement. But then
Yeah.
On the approval, it says without reservation of any easements.
Yes, we have done this in other situations where there was a utility access that bisected a property. Typically, if you go into an infill type situation where there's a vacant lot in an area that's already been developed, you see this a lot in older parts of downtowns. There are utility easements that run through the property that make it, according to current utility standards, inaccessible for crews to get in there and perform maintenance activities on utilities. In this particular situation, we would propose that utility or a right-of-way access be legally drawn, that the owner of that cabin would be bound to allow public works maintenance crews to access the setback of Crystal Park Road. And I don't know what they would need to access it for. You've seen the photos of it. It's grassed, it's a grassy area. There's existing larger trees in that area. It's not a gravel shoulder or anything. There is no shoulder on Crystal Park Road there. So we've never really been given any idea as to what does maintenance of this right-of-way entail?
Well, it sounds like a potential compromise is what I'm trying to. get to.
Yeah.
So striking that comment without reservation of any easements would make sense, correct?
Correct. But we're very open to granting access in that easement to the city, to Public Works, to whoever. It would have to be a legal document drawn up by the city and the owner. And then it would become part of the title policy for that property. When it was sold, it would be an exhibit to that title policy that there is in fact an access easement to that setback, so that if in the future, maintenance did need to occur in that area. And again, I'm at a loss as to what that maintenance might be. But what that access would do is allow the city to do whatever they needed to within that, in that area.
And you just said that it would be drawn up by the owner. Is it the current owner or the future owner?
The current owner.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have to be done with the current owner so that it could be titled, so that the property could be improved. But, each one of the existing structures out there right now that's undergoing rehabilitation, each one will have its own title. That's not the case right now. The property is handled as one large tract with 24, 25 existing homes on it. When the development plan is approved, each one of those homes will have its own title so that it can be sold as an individual residence. But we would definitely be open to any kind of arrangement where we could grant that type of language. We haven't drafted it up now because frankly, we didn't know how receptive the city would be to it. The first thing that needs to be corrected is making sure the right of way doesn't bisect the cabin. It's a dilemma. We understand.
Great. Steve, do you have any questions?
Yeah,
Get closer to the mic, please.
oh, sorry. I agree with what she was saying about you don't seem to have an actual reason for what you've requested to be vacated. In other words, what's the legal minimum that you could get away with?
The reason is pretty clear. We have a structure that's 2/3 within the public right of way and 1/3 on private property. The grounds for the shaded area that you see right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure, working with the city, if we needed to reduce that area that's between the wall of the building and the Crystal Park Road right of way, that's something that could be investigated. But again, the side yard setback, when we had this surveyed, there were some requirements as far as what does the minimum distance need to be from the edge of the pavement and the side of that house. I don't know in the future if Crystal Park Road were to be widened in that particular area. If you were to reduce that setback area so that it was the side of the structure and not as indicated, what that would do as far as allowing the road to be constructed right up to the side of the cabin. Obviously, that's not an ideal situation. So I believe that what we're anticipating is that if there ever was expansion of Crystal Park Road, it wouldn't be expanded up to the side of the cabin. It would be expanded up to the boundary that we're showing in that graphic.
I guess the
Okay,
point,
Steve, we don't need to be negotiating the real details of,
right, I
we need to be
understand that.
careful.
All I'm
with
saying
going
is
there.
that basically they're asking the city to give them land. And,
You speak into the mic.
okay, basically you're asking the city to give you land. I think the city would be more receptive to that if it was the minimum possible.
Okay, let's not try to get down to the inches.
Okay,
I have some questions back to the major development. There are 9 new lots you're proposing. And it looks like there's 23 other dwellings. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, and will all of those existing dwellings be part of this HOA? Or are some of them excluded? First of all, that's my first question. I couldn't quite tell from the major development plan graphic.
All of the existing structures are within the new HOA.
Okay, including the ones that are not just the footprint.
I should, qualify that there would be 2 separate homeowner associations. You would have the historic cabin district that's west of Sutherland Creek. So all of the existing structures would be part of that HOA. And then you would have the HOA that would have jurisdiction within the area east of Sutherland Creek. So the 9 new lots would be under that HOA. And the HOA CCRs, the conditions for, and those have already been drafted and submitted to the city for both of those.
Okay, so there's lot 10 that's got an existing structure, but it's accessed from that new access road?
It would be included in the new portion of
In the
the
new
HOA.
portion.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it is a part of the HOA.
Okay, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to understand a little bit about the parking requirements and, there's a statement that there are 60 parking places being requested. When I look at this drawing, I count 50 is how many I can see denoted there. I'm assuming that the other 10 that are being in the count are actually on the city right of way. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. We are giving credit for a driveway that is part of an existing structure. We are being given credit for a driveway that's part of a new home to be built. So including those spaces, we do have 60 spaces indicated on the plan.
For the existing cabins, the existing structures there on the east side of the creek, on the west side, there are, I count something like 45 off-street places, off the right of way. Is that about? It's enough. I'm just trying to drill down to what, there are parking requirements. I'm looking at that too.
Yes, and that would be correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions at this time. So, we'll give you a chance at the end to recap briefly after we have our public comment. Thank you. Okay, now's the time for the public to, if you'd like to make comments on this, step to the mic and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm John Maynard. I live at 1320 Indian Oaks Place, adjacent to this property. My first question is to you, and it's a procedural question. You probably saw my email to the city suggesting that this should be postponed. In my discussions with Michelle Anthony in the past, she had indicated to me that she was requiring a neighborhood meeting and that the applicant, Bill Gooman, had agreed to such meeting, but that has not occurred. And some of the questions that I have are going to be, I'm going to need to have a follow-up depending on what the answer is. This is the type of thing that would be covered in a neighborhood meeting. If you want to go through that here and essentially hold the neighborhood meeting tonight, I guess I'm happy with that. But my procedural request is that if I ask a question and then Mr. Gooman comes and provides an answer, will I be able to then have a follow-up question that's based on the information that he provides?
Okay, I'd like to ask, my understanding was there was a neighborhood meeting in April at about the time the concept plan was presented. Is that correct? Hannah?
Thank you, Chair Delwich. Yes, there was a neighborhood meeting that was held on April 8th of this year.
And that meeting was not noticed to me and my neighbors. So I happened to attend that meeting because I heard through social media that it was being held. But the other neighbors that are here and going to speak were not invited and did not know about that meeting. And we didn't have the plan that's for you today to discuss and ask questions of. It was basically, do you want a tour of the cabins? And then we had an informal discussion. So I don't consider that to be the neighborhood meeting.
Okay. At this point, I think you can ask your questions and we'll try to work with you and the applicant to the extent possible.
Okay. I might sit down for a while, let my neighbors ask some questions or make some comments and then come back up if that's okay.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Dave McDonald. I live at 1385 Indian Oaks Place. I live above lots 1 and 2 on this proposed development plan. And if you take a look off to the right, it shows a.
Could you, stay close to the mic or
Sure.
It won't go into the record and
Gotcha.
people watching on YouTube won't
Okay.
be able to see
Let
what's
me
going on.
repeat what I said. I live above lots 1 and 2 on the proposed development plan. And if you take a look at the plan, there's a no build line on it. And if you follow that along, there's not enough room to build a house on those 2 lots beneath my house. So I'm afraid that what's going to happen is if a full-size house was to be built, they're going to sell the property and leave. And I'm going to be left either one fighting with my new neighbor or whatever developer goes to develop these lots. I'm happy with anything being built beneath me if it's smart, but the lot should either be designated as maybe a tiny house lot or the lots should be combined so we can smartly build something without building well into the hillside because there's not enough room. And I'm afraid I'm going to be left in peril. The hillside would substantially be gone. Where is my existing house even going to drain down that hillside? It is steep. The water's going to run fast. And, I feel like I would be left in a really bad position if this plan was to go through as it's listed here. And that no build line goes through other lots too. These are not the only 2 lots that, in my opinion, wouldn't support a full-size house without going into the hillside substantially. I'm also concerned about the parking out on Crystal Park Road. I thought I heard, we're talking about parking spots, but then there's other parking that's supposed to happen on that road or maybe on Sutherland Road where it's full. In the summer, you got the Crystal Park Cantina, the parking's full. Cars are already up Sutherland Avenue or Sutherland Road. If there was more cars parked there, you got a steep road, you got a curve, you got no sidewalks. It's not going to be safe. So I'd like to see enough parking actually within the development and not having to go outside because that parking's pretty much already full a lot of evenings. And thanks for listening.
My name is Mark Zapel, and I live at 1330 Indian Oaks Place. Both John and Dave, who just spoke, they're both my neighbors. And as John mentioned earlier, none of us got invited to that meeting in April, so that staff report should really be corrected. For them to state they invited all the neighbors, that wasn't the case. What they did is they invited people in Crystal Park Road and people even like myself who were excited about them fixing up all those cabins, but they were also looking for people that didn't disagree with their development plan, which a lot of us on Indian Oaks who are directly affected, who actually border the property, unlike those people that went to the April 8th meeting. They were just basically looking for a lot of cheerleaders to show up to.
Yeah, excuse me, address the commission, not staff. That's the appropriate way
Okay,
to
well,
speak.
staff wrote the report. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll address you. So I think they were just looking for people that would supported their position and supported what they want to do in their development plan. As Dave indicated, a lot of us people that have homes in the Indian Oaks subdivision, which is the subdivision that directly borders the Manitou cabin development area. And so we're looking at this plan that they've suggested here, and lots from 1 to number 8 on the development plan all show potential construction into the hillside that's right below us. And then they have this little note in here that says, if once a lot is going to be developed, then, not now, but then a site-specific study would be conducted with the final building site. Well, I feel, and I think others feel as well, they're just kicking this thing down the can. We would like to see, number one, a firm no-build sign line established on the plan that's in front of the Planning Commission, so we know how far up that hillside they're going to build. The geo report states there are erosional features along the hillside slope, and many of the slopes are unstable with erodible soil. It also states that all slopes with a pitch greater than 30% are generally designated no build zones. So is that 30% rule? Is that being reflected in the plan that's being presented to the Planning Commission right now? If it isn't, they're not following their own, geo hazard reports. The other part of this is, it just doesn't seem right that they're going to sell these lots to builders, and maybe these lots aren't even buildable. And as Dave just indicated, you get either a situation where you're going to have run-in with a developer or run-in with a future neighbor that we don't need, and a possible compromised hillside right below our foundations. So basically, we would like to see these site-specific studies, these geo-survey studies done now in advance, and not have the can kicked down the road to some builder who maybe is going to get sold a bill of goods, which isn't going to do anybody any good, and it's going to create a lot of ill will. I would believe that Manitou would like to see this development done in a responsible way where everybody's a winner. But the way this thing is designed right now, I see a lot of losers and a lot of potential problems. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
My name is Kathy Nims. I live at 9 Sandra Lane, and I do adjoin the property. My concern of the moment is on the vacation of the public property. It was mentioned that there was no plan to expand Crystal Park Road. However, Crystal Park Road had a committee that existed for several years to discuss improvements to Crystal Park Road. And one of those improvements discussed was sidewalks. A grant was applied for by the city planning of Manitou, and the initial approval was obtained for that grant. It did not go through due to some neighbor opposition at this time. However, Crystal Park community is expanding. The traffic on Crystal Park Road will be increasing. In the future, that sidewalk is going to be required. And it goes right by this proposed vacation. It goes into the land that they want to take away from the public who needs a sidewalk. And this is something that is in the future. It's not in the present, but you can't give it away now and get it back later. And if you've walked on that road, or if you've driven on it and seen people, they walk on the inside of that blind corner, which is right where this vacation discussion is. There is desperate need for a sidewalk. The lane has no space for a pedestrian. If there's a pedestrian and a car, sure, they can swerve into the other lane if there's not a car coming. If there is a car coming and there's a pedestrian, the car has to stop. Well, are cars prepared to stop in the middle of Crystal Park Road coming down from Crystal Park community? No, it's a very, very dangerous situation and has been extensively discussed by neighbors. And yes, right now, the decision is no sidewalks. It's going to have to be revisited in the future. We cannot give away the property for a sidewalk. And in fact, I thought that sidewalks were going to be all the way along the Cheyenne, well, not Cheyenne Village, the log cabin property, sidewalks all along the property as the development plan. What happened to sidewalks? They're-
Excuse me.
They're not in.
We
on the
are
plan.
only listening. No, you speak to we're not going to go back and forth.
Okay, okay. Well, I see, I'm not sure what are sidewalks, where are sidewalks, but I see large areas with no sidewalks. And I would like to see sidewalks along the entire property. And if there's a turn, then of course you put curbs and a sidewalk into a driveway. But you don't just have space open in front of buildings where cars park going in. Where do pedestrians walk? The walking, it is very dangerous, and the cantina is insanity to try to walk on that area. It is very, very difficult. And people, the neighbors, we all walk. We're all out there walking our dogs, and it is crazy. We need help.
Great. Thank you.
My name is Laura Steinbach. I live at 1 Loretta Lane, which is within the 500 feet. I am in full support of the development plan. I think that these developers, well, I think that they're local owners. They've shown incredible patience as over the last couple of years of going through this process. They have negotiated in good faith on every request. I too was going to bring up the sidewalk relative to the vacation request. We did go through a very long process, and it demonstrated that about 90% of the current population didn't want sidewalks. We wanted it just the way it is. And the notion of selling a lot and having somebody do all the work that a normal contractor would do just seems like asking a little bit too much of somebody who's really trying to restore these beautiful log cabins. And we need lower income, affordable. We need affordable housing in our community. There's hardly any affordable housing in our community, and these represent an opportunity to provide that for our neighborhood. My daughter's a nurse, my other daughter's a teacher. They could no more afford to be in our community right now at all. And I can absolutely appreciate the comment about we're setting ourselves up for, arguments in the future. But it's kind of the nature of building. I mean, every time somebody buys a lot, you guys are more familiar than I am, but I'm sure there's a lot that goes into the process. And that's what building contractors do. So I just think we're putting too much on this developer. They've shown to care about the property. They've invested in the trees. We did ask for the tour of we wanted more conversations with them. We wanted to understand what the plan was. We wanted to see things, touch things, those kinds of things, get a real visual. And they were more than willing to meet with us. And they followed the process, checked with the city, make sure that's okay. And we did tell as many neighbors as we knew, and that maybe in Indian Heights didn't know, but they were there. And at that meeting, at that tour of the property, he said, please, if you have questions, reach out. So this notion that they're unavailable for comments, questions, all we did was say, hey, we would love to meet and talk about it. And we were granted that. So I just think they've gone out of their way. We had another community meeting right from the get-go before COVID. It was huge presence there. I still remember.
Yeah, we're aware of the history of the meetings.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
All right. Just for the record, they did happen. So and again, sidewalks, I can appreciate that Kathy's desire, but it was clear in the original 2 or 3 years that a lot of people were not in favor of. So I think that's about it.
Thank you.
In support.
No, please, let's let other people speak.
I'll take my turn now. Again, John Maynard, 1320 Indian Oaks Place. The first thing I'd like to talk about is stability. And Mark Sapel mentioned that the normal process for determining where a no build line should be would be to prepare a slope analysis. I don't see that in the application, any of the application materials. And contrary to what the previous speaker just said, I contacted Bill Goodman's office some time ago asking for a slope stability analysis, and I never heard back. So we're getting some mixed messages here on who gets communicated with and who doesn't. If there were a slope stability analysis that indicated where the 30% slope line is, and that became the no build line, I think a lot of the comments relative to slope stability would go away, but we haven't had that information. As you see in your staff report, there have been a geotechnical report. It's according to the city's terminology, a level 2 report. And the staff recommendation is that there would be a level 3 report with each lot after this lot is created. And I think that's backwards. Why would the city agree to approve lots that may not be buildable? Why wouldn't you have a study done in advance to determine buildability? And then those lots that are determined to be buildable can go forward and be platted. And if there are some that can't be built, that area doesn't get platted as a building site. So I think the process is backwards. I believe the new land use code will correct this if I read it correctly, and I've just glanced through it this week. But I think it's in your purview as planning commissioners to require that a level 3 geotechnical study be done at this stage prior to creating the lots that have 30% or greater slope. I'm just going to briefly touch on the Crystal Park Road and improvements issue. The previous 2 speakers are correct. There's been a public process. The city had done a study that indicated that there are safety concerns along Crystal Park Road and that improvements are needed. the majority of residents didn't want all of the improvements that were suggested. However, I would suggest that your subdivision regulations require that public improvements to adjacent streets be made in conjunction with subdivision. And I know we're at a development plan stage now, but those improvements should be on the development plan. I got a 11/17 copy of the plan in the mail. It wasn't enough detail on that drawing to determine if there were any public improvements proposed. Perhaps there are, perhaps there are not. I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps the applicant can address that in the rebuttal. My last comment has to do with the vacation. And the first question I think you need to ask is there a justification for giving up public land for the benefit of private business? And the simple answer to me that is no. The building could be removed. Quite frankly, here's an idea. Remove the building, you keep the materials. There's going to be repairs required to the existing historic structures. Those materials can be reused in those repairs rather than try and buy new fabricated materials that aren't of historic significance, perhaps. So there's a solution there. It's just one that's not acceptable to this particular group. I did have another comment in here too, and there was some discussion about the park and the desire to have access to the creek. And my question here will there be a public trail along the creek through the length of the property? I can't see that on the 11/17 that I received, or was that even discussed? But that, to me, that would be a community benefit. It could be incorporated into the association ownership, common ownership of the property, and quite frankly, the public would use it. If a sidewalk is required along Crystal Park Road, perhaps that walkway could substitute for the sidewalk. It would be a much more pleasant walking experience to do that than to walk along Crystal Park Road. So I think there's options here that haven't been investigated by this development team that probably would have come to light if they'd had a neighborhood meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Jeffrey Albert. I live at 4921 Dunecrest Drive in Colorado Springs. I'm the project manager overseeing the renovations at the Crystal Park Village. They're at 183 Crystal Park Road. Excuse me. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention the care and consideration with which each and every step of construction has been taken thus far and will be taken in this process. The lot, as the property as it sits now, is kind of a grading and erosion control nightmare. As you saw in the grading and erosion control development plan, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the property because as of right now, most of the water drains directly towards cabins and it's ruining foundations and cabins themselves. So these owners have taken care and consideration in every step of this process to not only preserve but restore these cabins to their original glory and original beauty. We have put into place implementations to support the foundations temporarily or permanently in some situations to make sure these cabins are not collapsing in on themselves, because the last however long that the adult care facility was there, the maintenance been fairly. None of the cabins have been cared for to the level that they needed to be. This ownership group has come in and changed that. Their care and compassion for each individual cabin is reflected in the fact that they go through step after step after step to make sure that anything they're doing to these cabins is done the way it needs to be done to the historical standards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Rex Hoey, 17 Craig Lane, so not too far. Actually, previous to that, it was at 224 Crystal Park Road. But the last time I was at this microphone was, I want to say, at the last snowfall that we had. And I think I said that I have a heart for the Planning Commission because I used to sit on a planning commission. And it does look like some discussions are in progress. We're making some progress. I remember I said, we need to put our heads together to make this happen. What's the alternative? 20-floor structure with an adjoining stacked parking.
That's not going to happen. It's not.
No,
zoned
I
for
don't think
that.
so either. So in any event, I'm very happy to see that we have some progress, it looks like.
Thank you. Kathy, did you want to come up and briefly, very briefly?
A survey was completed and the majority of neighbors in the larger Crystal Hills and Crystal Park area did support sidewalks, but the neighbors who the sidewalks would go through their property opposed it. And so that's how it got opposed.
Okay, I'm sure we could, it was a pretty contentious thing. Yeah. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? If the applicant would like to come back just very briefly, if you want to cover anything of what was said. We don't want to go on and on, but please briefly, it is getting.
I understand. And as I mentioned when, Bill Gooman, by the way, for the record, this process has been going on for over 2 years. Commissioners are aware of the public meetings that have been held. I just made a couple of notes here regarding John Maynard. I believe he brought this up at a previous hearing. Who called who? I have no record of him calling our office. If he contacted Michelle Anthony, that's great. Michelle Anthony hasn't been with the city for over a year now. However, there's been ample opportunity for any citizen to visit the planning department, meet with the planners, look at the plans and documents that have been submitted. I do know for a fact that on April 8th, which was the last on-site meeting that was held for neighbors, that John Maynard was in attendance. So the comment by Mr. Staples that we only held that meeting for those who were in support of the project, it's obvious Mr. Maynard is not in support of the project based on some of his comments this evening. So he was there, he was aware of it. As far as options that have not been addressed, I'd like to ask members of the public who are speaking in opposition of this project, how many of them attended the Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting when the Pocket Park was negotiated with that board? There were 2 meetings that were held for the public. They were the ones that selected the site at the corner of Sutherland and Crystal Park Road. There was an original proposal for a trail link along Sutherland Creek that was tabled, and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board opted not to have a trail along the creek and went for the Pocket Park instead. Same with the HPC. How many of the members or how many of the citizens that spoke tonight attended any of the HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission meetings. Personally, I spoke at each one of them. I don't recall Mr. Maynard or any of the other neighbors attending any of those HPC meetings. At those meetings, we certainly discussed options with regard to cabin 7. What do we do with it? You know, there are other comments that I just think it's unconscionable and unreasonable after a 2-year planning period that we're here at the table tonight discussing things, you know, drainage. Where does the drainage from my property go? I'd like to ask Mr. McDonald, does the drainage from his property now drain onto my client's property? If so, that's a problem and it needs to be corrected immediately to avoid the possibility of any future erosion and damage to the new construction that happens there. Again, public process, we've entertained and hosted over 160 people on the property and off the property. We have been open every step of the way. We have not avoided anything, any questions, any concerns. Every public notification letter that went out, including the one you have before you that was on the screen before, said, do you have questions? Do you have concerns? Visit the city planning department, contact Bill Gooman, contact Gooman and Associates. I'm not the only one in that office. I can tell you without a doubt that the only people who have contacted us regarding concerns for this property are, when will they be made available for sale? I want to buy one. And this is long overdue. The only complaint that I've seen out there is, why did you put up the orange construction fence? I walk my dog across that property and now I can't. I'm sorry. But I think it's you know, just part of a greater problem here is we've reached out in accordance with the protocol that the city has set forth for public input. We have invited people who claim that we didn't showed up at meetings that they claim they weren't invited to. If you weren't invited to, or if you didn't know about the meeting, how could you have been in attendance? I mean, I would ask you that. And this is by no means to be argumentative. It is to defend our position that I think some of the things that were brought this evening, brought to your attention, no sidewalks along Crystal Park Road. We have the development plan in front of us. We did provide sidewalks. If there was a sidewalk committee, and maybe the planning director can speak to this, we're unaware of a sidewalk committee. Why wasn't that brought to our attention? In any case, there are sidewalks on the development plan, not in the immediate area of the area that we're requesting for vacation. We've already agreed and have on the table right now. We'll negotiate whatever, you know, we need to let there be access into what we're requesting so that that cabin doesn't have to be removed. And it's, you know, should the cabin be dismantled? Cabin 7, should it be relocated? These were all discussed at length with the Historic Preservation Commission. I don't recall any of the individuals who spoke at this table tonight being in attendance at that meeting, the last one or the one before then, and offering any input with regard to that.
This was the only meeting where we discussed vacation, so it wouldn't have been appropriate to discuss it at the HPC meeting.
It was discussed at the first meeting. We realized at the second meeting, which was an actual voting meeting and a formal public hearing, that it was not appropriate, and we did not discuss it at that meeting. I'm talking dismantling the cabin.
Okay, thank you.
Which most certainly was within the purview of an HPC discussion. You know, this is the beginning of a development, you know, that we're asking for you to approve tonight. This is not the end of it. There's still a final plat that needs to be submitted. There is still a hearing at City Council. The invitation that we have extended to every neighbor of ours, regardless of what their position on this development remains. If there are questions, if there are comments, if there are concerns, ask the planning department. The planning department has a very lengthy history of this project, as do we. I can't speak for Michelle Anthony.
Okay, thank you. You know, we're trying to move forward now. Michelle's no longer here.
Correct.
So let's, you've gone on for a while. We need to.
I'm sorry, after 2 years, I've had a lot to say, and I apologize to the commissioners if I overstated anything, but and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
And we do have the large scale plans here that are available for the commission or anybody else in attendance to look at. I understand 8.5 by 11 and 11 by 17s are tough to read.
One more quick thing, Taylor Stamp.
Excuse me, get close to the mic and state your name and address since you haven't spoken before. Thanks.
Taylor Stamp, 1431 West Kuchara Street, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Yeah, just quickly, as Bill mentioned, this has been a 2-year process. For some of the neighbors to come and say that we're just now starting to talk about things. We've been working on this for a very, very long time. I personally talked to John Maynard at the meeting and said, hey, please reach out to me or any of us if you have any questions about the project. We're an open book. That meeting was set to bring people in opposition to the meeting, to show them, to talk to them. Those that didn't show up, I don't know why they didn't, but we made all efforts to do so. So yeah, to further delay this would just be the biggest detriment to our project. And really, we've checked every box possible. So would really appreciate this to be moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it's a public comment period of the meeting now. So, I'll just start a little bit and there's a lot to talk about. I am just not comfortable with the vacation. I don't think it makes any sense. If you ever walk on Crystal Park Road, it's dangerous. And I think that at some time in the future, it will have to be expanded. And if we vacate this portion, which is, our experts in the city have said we can't, if we vacate that, the only solution would be to take property away from people across the street. If you've walked there, it's scary. I walked there today, I walked there last week, and I just think it makes no sense.
I'm kind of torn on this one. I know that there's narrower places on Crystal Park Boulevard further up that have been, were given away for a wall to be built, and so could widen it, narrow it. I'm just trying to think of a way. Yeah, I could see the cabin. I mean, then they take it out. It is a big footprint that to add to, beyond the cabin that they're asking for. If we try to restrict it to back farther or allow city access for sidewalk and up to the edge of the cabin wall. But yeah, you might, I mean, you might need to take that cabin out in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it seems to me it's like it's a much bigger equation. It's like we're talking like 21 structures. And we're talking about taking a big chunk out of our right of way for a 640 square foot cabin or whatever it is. And it just, to me, it's like the math doesn't work. It's like there are all these other structures that are going to be rehabilitated. It's a great project. I mean, to save that, but I think that the balance, it just, yeah, I've looked at it too. I walked by that cabin. It's beautiful. But, I like the idea, save the materials. They can be used. It's like, this isn't the only structure that's been built in a right of way. It happens all over. I happen to own one that has a garage in the right of way. And I'll never get a clear title to it unless I demo the garage. And it's just reality. And I think it's just a big ask to the city and to Public Works to say, oh yeah, let's just, narrow our 50-foot right of way by 7 feet or whatever it is, or 12 feet. It just,
Right, yeah.
and then the outcome is you're going to have a structure that's like inches away from the right of way. That in itself it's a real safety issue. And yeah, you'll find someone who will buy it, but then they'll be unhappy. And I just think it's really bad policy to do something like that. And I'm mystified. I think there's so much else going on positive with this property that this one 640 square foot cabin, maybe it needs to be sacrificed for the sake of the project.
So if the vacation is denied, then the building would have to be removed?
Yes. And there's a process for it.
Well, maybe 2/3 of that expense should be on the city.
Well, that's, that could be a negotiation, I guess, but I think we're here just to make a recommendation to council based on the findings. And I don't think staff has taken this lightly and said, oh, just rip it. I think there's anguish all the way around. It's a beautiful building, but it just, it's not appropriate to shrink that right away.
What about the historic preservation recommendations?
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Don't they say that it should be preserved?
No, what they there's a process. The next step, if the vacation doesn't go through, which, I can't imagine it will, but if it doesn't go through, the next step is to go before the Historic Preservation Commission and ask to remove it. And there's a process. And right now it's like the applicant mentioned that there are 3 buildings that were requested to be demolished. And even though they're not historic, they are on the historic property. And so they went through the process. They had a meeting last week where the Historic Preservation Commission recommended removal. That'll go on to council. And it's, there's findings that justify it. And I think in this case, the findings will be likely similar. Like, they're not going to hold up a project and say, no, your between a rock and a hard place.
Gotcha. That was my question. That was the essence.
As far as the comments about the no build slope, each one, and correct me if I'm wrong, but each one of those lots, before anything is done, are going to have to be individually surveyed. And if the developer, the builder, whoever wants to go into that 30-degree slope, they're going to have to come in front of us again and justify that. So that's not just administratively approved, that has to go in front of the planning commission, just so you guys know. It's a major event and it's, I'll leave it at that. I was surprised to hear about the cabin being just 4 walls and a roof. I thought
No floor, yeah.
I thought there was more to it. So.
Yeah, just, what you brought up about the slope and all that, I was wanting to ask the planning director what the process is, since there hasn't been the major subdivision or the plat or any of that. I mean, how will that work?
Thank you, Chair Delwich. So with the slope stability and the slope component to the project, a tier 2 report is in our current code technically acceptable for this level of project. However, when it gets down to the major subdivision, that's when we would actually be defining the exact location of that no build line, which is what a tier 3 report would indicate. So there would be another step in the process, which we are recommending would come back to the Planning Commission that would hone in that no builds line or that tier 3 report. So as it's currently working, this is according to code. However, a more intensive report could also be required at this stage.
Okay, and so, one of the people who spoke expressed a concern like, it looks like these proposed lots aren't buildable unless you're building a tiny house or encroaching. Now, when we get to the subdivision review, what's in the major development plan is just a plan. And at that point, it's conceivable that we could say, no, that, we approve the major development, but we did not approve the specific configuration of the lots. Is that correct or not? Or am I misreading that?
So my understanding would be that we could hone in the lot configuration with the major subdivision and then update the development plan according to the more specific information that we'd get at that stage. So if it was found that a tier 3 report showed that there was a lot that didn't have any technically buildable area, like literally 0 or more than just a couple square feet or something like that, then we could process an update to the development plan to reflect what was approved in the major subdivision.
So basically this would all happen during the major development process. I mean, major subdivision process.
That's correct. It is, the no build line is relatively preliminary until we get that more technical information. And we do have the major subdivision application as the loop closer in this case.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So in theory, the major subdivision could go in with 9 lots and come out with 7 based on the buildability, based on the tier 3 report?
That's correct. They would not be able to increase the number of lots because that wasn't initially approved by the Planning Commission, but a fewer number would not be an intensification of what was approved.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Can I just clarify
Sure.
one thing? So any encroachment in a right of way, the city would have every right to remove it. So just like your garage, if the city wanted to, they could come in and say, this garage needs to be demolished. It's in our right of way, with or without the vacation. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you.
If I could add another comment, I apologize. The applicant at this time is also asking for postponement to reconsider the right-of-way vacation if that was something that was considerable to the Planning Commission.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The applicant is requesting postponement at this point to reconsider the right-of-way application if that was something that the planning commission would be in favor of.
Are you suggesting that they want to reconsider maybe withdrawing the application?
I think the specifics are to be worked out. I don't know.
Okay.
But the consideration of the major development plan, but not the vacation?
So I will attempt to clarify, and perhaps the applicant wants to speak to this as well. I see it as a couple of options. First, the vacation and major development plan, the reason that they're so intertwined and you're hearing them both as one matter is because the vacation is shown on the major development plan. Of course, you can bring a vacation without a major development and vice versa. But in this case, because the vacation is shown on the major development plan, we're hearing them together. With that being said, they are separate criteria for the two. So theoretically, you could deny the vacation under the criteria that there's still public necessity for the right of way. And then you can approve the major development plan with the condition that the plat be correct, or that the plan be corrected to remove the vacation. That's one option. Another option, as the applicant has mentioned, is to continue the item, and it sounds like they might do some adjusting.
Okay, yeah, what I was thinking was possibly considering denying the vacation, making that recommendation to council and tabling the major development for a date certain, like December or whatever makes sense. Because, there's steps involved here that have to be done, that. So that, anyway, is that plausible?
Yes.
Ellen, help me understand why the delay for the major development plan in that situation.
Well, I guess it's like we have all these moving pieces and we, if the vacation is denied, then the next step is dealing with the going back to the HPC to request demo of the that build, structure that's in the right of way. And then that's a process too that has to happen.
Does it have to happen as part of this major development plan? I mean, I know that this has been going, they've been trying to move this forward. And if we're in agreement on the denying the vacation, doesn't the Historic Preservation Committee, they'll deal with the outcome. Are we hindering them in some way by approving the major development plan?
Okay. So the one possible path would be recommend denial of the vacation and then possibly move to recommend approval of the major development pending resolution of the vacation and removal of that structure from the property.
I would just condition that the vacation denial be updated on the plan. So if you're accepting the plan, if you move to approve the plan or recommend that, then you would condition that the vacation be removed from the plan. And then you could go on to recommend denial of the vacation. So two separate motions.
Okay.
One with a condition, one not.
Okay, and it doesn't matter which order we do this. Thank you. Does that make sense?
I would be in favor of moving it forward with, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I do
No, I
feel
agree
like
with
this
that.
has been going on for so long and they are.
Okay, so I'll start this off. I would move that we recommend denial of vacation 2201 with the staff rationale that that it doesn't meet the criteria for vacation.
I'll second that.
Well, but to be clear, they're asking for postponement of that decision, correct?
That's accurate. Tabling of both applications.
I'm sorry, table what?
A potential table of both applications, the
Okay,
development plan and.
So that's
right-of-way
not what they'd
vacation.
like.
Chair, if you wanted to, you could call the applicant back up to speak to it
Okay,
if you'd like.
okay.
Yeah.
Commissioners, thank you. We are asking you to rescind or remove from consideration vacation of the right of way. We do want a vote on the development plan. We need to move forward with the project. We will amend the development plan so that it removes the right-of-way vacation from it. We'll have to talk with our client as far as how we would proceed with cabin 7, but we don't want that to be a consideration. So you can deny the right-of-way vacation, but we want that separate from the development plan.
Okay, so we can go ahead and deny it. Thank you. Thanks.
The
I
vacation.
think I understand.
Okay. great.
Okay. So, okay, we have a motion and a second to,
Could you repeat the motion? I'm sorry.
okay. I'd like to get the exact, the staff had a good, okay, we move to deny the right of way, recommend denial of the right of way vacation based upon the findings that the request does not meet the review criteria for granting a right of way vacation as set forth in City Code Section 16.34.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second.
Well, that's your motion, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Oh, I think Carrie.
Oh,
Yeah, she did.
Okay. Okay. So if there's no more discussion. Let's vote. All in favor? Okay. So that passes. And now the next item would be the major development.
I'll make a motion to approve major development plan 2201. I'm looking to see what the staff recommendations are, but there really aren't any.
Three conditions.
With the following conditions. 1, a public facilities and service impact report shall be submitted and reviewed in conjunction with a major subdivision application. 2, the required future major subdivision application shall be raised to the review authority of the City Planning Commission and City Council. 3, a note stating additional cabin structures not shown on this development plan are not permitted to be added to the major development plan.
And 4, that the plan be updated to show that the vacation is no longer.
And
on there.
4, the plan be updated to show that the vacation is no longer part of the major development plan.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. And all in favor? Okay. Okay, so the future steps will be the plat, major subdivision and so on. So we have ways to go. Okay, So move on, other business. Discussion regarding goals and visions related to the city budget.
Thank you, Chair Delwich. So this is a discussion about the 2023 budget for the City Planning Commission. So in previous years, there had been a very brief presentation regarding a budget to help continue education for commissioners, as well as different training opportunities and the potential for a retreat. For 2023, we are proposing to keep that same goal and vision for the City Planning Commission and increase that budget by $300. So this past year, there's a budget of $1,100, and in 2023, we're proposing an increase that budget to 14. And that 1,400 would be enough to send commissioners to conferences, whether that was in person or virtual, or to bring training into the City Planning Commission meeting to discuss rules, bylaws, and procedures. So with that, I wanted to present that to the Planning Commission and see if there was any feedback or if you had any other goals or visions for 2023.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Well, I didn't know we had a budget, so good for you. So,
Come on, we approved one last year.
but I don't have access to classes. I mean, I don't know what is out there or what you would recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of opportunities. One opportunity that I highly recommend is the Colorado State City Planning Conference. We do have conferences and they happen every year in late September. So they have both in-person conferences and virtual options. And part of those are training for elected officials or appointed officials, city planning commissioners in particular, and also just sessions on where the profession is going, best practices, cool projects that have happened throughout the state. I enjoy going to the state conference, but there also is a series of trainings given by the Department of Local Affairs. And those are much more technical. They're about rules and procedures more so, but they are very informative. There also are a number of other conferences that are city planning related. There's the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute. There's the Four Corners Conference. So there's a number of options that would be available.
If I can make a recommendation, it would be kind of fun to spend some money, those funds, to bring someone to us, as opposed to going somewhere like someone like yourself that's got some experience. That is all I know is this room. I don't know what other people are doing, and it would be nice to get some outside input. Maybe there's a consultant that you can use that money on and come and have a, teach us versus us going to something.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely look into that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Good idea, Mike.
Great. This isn't a item that needs to be voted on, but if people are, or if commissioners are in general agreement with that direction, then I'm happy to move forward with that.
I think we are.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other business? Okay, and we're adjourned. Huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I think that there's still a ways to go. Yeah. Because